Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Here at Software People Stories, we are celebrating Women's Month with 5 different women being featured in series.
We have the distinct privilege to introduce 5 very inspiring women from different realms of technology. I would like to introduce Palashi, who's a research scholar from Cornell University, who's breaking the barriers between social impact and technology. Then we have Pooja SR, who comes from the investment background and social work. And now she is the managing director for Anita B, who shares her interesting journey. And next we have Vaishali James, who's a marketing professional for technology. And she talks about her journey of coming from a very humble background and breaking different arenas. Next, we have Pramita, who's a satellite engineer, and she talks about how do we take 75 people to the moon from India. And last but not the least, we have Bindu Sunil, who shares her passion of embedded and how she's changed her avatar to become a cloud engineer, and she's heading the cloud division in Wipro.
This whole month, every Friday, consecutively, we'll be releasing one new episode. Don't forget to listen to each one of them and get inspired.
Hi, welcome to Software People Stories, Vaishali. So happy to have you here.
Thank you, Gayatri. Very, very kind of you to have me here. And yeah, I'm happy to be here as well.
Like in any Software People Story episode, I have known you now more than 5 years. I would like you to introduce you and your enigmatic and amazing career to our listeners.
Thank you. That's very kind. I'm not sure those are the words I would choose to describe my career. In any case, I'm a 25-year plus marketing associate. So I've been a marketing professional for most part of my working life. I spent 19 years in ITES, my first job, and then decided to move to something that would have a slightly larger social impact, because I find social impact perhaps the need of the hour and also very critical given the age that we live in today. So I moved to the fintech industry, did an entrepreneurial, quote unquote, entrepreneurial stint for 4 years. And thanks to COVID, we had to kind of relook at all of that. And here I am, 25 years after, but in marketing all the way through.
Cool, Michelle. I mean, you have pretty much been in the marketing front of technology. This episode being released as part of the Women's Month celebration. What has been that initial interactions with technology, and what got you kind of interested, at the same time amazed at what about it? Being coming from the my background of marketing, I would like to understand from an outside in view and how it felt.
So first up, while you know, perhaps for people who are listening in, I'm a science graduate. So I graduated from science background, and then I came into ITES. I worked there for 5 years, and while I was working, I pursued my MBA from the Open University of London. So that's where I got my business part of the learning and the degree from. Being my first job, Gayatri, I didn't really have too much of a insight or inroads into technology and what technology actually could do, other than the little technologies that we all used to use in our daily lives. And way back in 96, when I started out my professional journey, the company that I was working for was in the forefront of bringing what we used to call IVR, which is an interactive voice response system, to the country. This is the company that introduced IVR for the first time in India, and we had introduced this for two government-based organizations, one the Department of Telecommunications, and one we put a POC for the railway. And what we saw was fascinating one, but it was also extremely amusing. And it told us that we were way ahead of our time in terms of bringing this technology and trying to automate routine functions. So the purpose of an IVR is, if you have a routine set of functions, instead of dealing with a human, you just deal with a machine, get your routine queries out of the way, and save human interaction for more complex or more challenging tasks. And when we put this IVR as a POC at railways, we used to bring the system back every evening because it's a POC. We can't really leave the system there. And in the evening, when we used to bring the system back to work, the bunch of us who were there at that time would sit in and listen to all the recordings to understand how people were using the system and to see if we could tweak it in some manner or the other to make it more user friendly. I used to do the recording for the voice prompts. So every time we played back, my awkward voice would come back to me, right? Saying for such and such a transaction, press 1, for such and such a transaction, press 2. And that one particular evening we came back, it was pretty late. At 8 o'clock, we've got the system. There are a bunch of us sitting around the system, and we start playing it. And the first recording that comes back, it's my voice saying, for arrivals, press 1, for departure, press 2, and then please dial in the extension number from where you're calling. And this person is trying to do something, and we get a call back or a voice back saying, I'm kind of struggling to understand why this woman is going on speaking and she's not letting me speak. I'm speaking, but she's still speaking, you know. So we kind of got that feeling that, one, people are not really ready for automation at this level and at this scale. And two, they're struggling to wrap their minds around the fact that automation of simple queries can actually be done and make their lives simpler. Of course, that night, all my colleagues who were there around the system kind of had a field day. They ragged the hell out of me because it was my voice. I took it extremely personally that, man, I mean, this person thought I was going on talking and not letting him talk. You know, that was one of my earliest memories of technology and in a government organization. It was embarrassing, to say the least.
It's funny.
To take it is right now. It's funny, but believe me, when it actually happened, it was embarrassing as all hell. What we learned from that is, if we slowly allow people to work the system through, they get a hang of it, and then they realize that it is something extremely indispensable, and it caters to an unsatisfied demand of people trying to reach and get information, and that's all they need to do. There was really no need for a human being to come and get, to talk to somebody. You come in, deal with an automated system, punch in whatever you require, get the information out from the system, and you're done. So that was my earliest tryst with technology, fresh out of botany, sitting in a government office, bringing the system back and hearing people say, you know what, she's not letting me talk.
I'm looking forward to more such experiences. You started your career in Servion. What was being not coming from a technology background, right? Interacting with technology and marketing for the technology elements, right? Today, we speak about a lot of things, minimalistic marketing, data-based marketing, a lot of analytical things and all of that. So coming from your background of knowing botany, being a science graduate, and having to brand the services that the team is providing. What was your, kind of way of learning yourself, skilling yourself? How did you go about?
I think the transition marketing as a subject or marketing as a discipline today has come way from where it started in 96. But I think the crux of the entire transformation, whether we talk analytics, whether we talk lead gen, whether we talk social media and all of that, at the end of the day, we need to see what experience we are leaving the consumer with. You and I are consumers. We consume services of a lot of brands, banking, telecommunications, hospitality. The crux of it, and that's where the marketing angle comes in, is that no matter what kind of technology you use, no matter how stylish or how latest the technology is, if you are not leaving your consumer with a good experience that the consumer can share, the point of investing millions and millions in technology is kind of a moot point. It's a waste of money. And the point about a good experience, Gayatri, and we've learned this the hard way across so many interactions we've had with multiple brands in these last 25 years, is there is a brand which tells a story to the outside world. And there are ways that the brand is felt by the consumer. So there is an inside story and then there is an outside story. And if both these stories don't match with each other, the experience you're leaving your consumer with 9.9 out of 10 times will be a bad one. Let me give you an example. I won't use the name of the brand because it's kind of unfair to, name brands. But take a brand that probably says, I'm happy to help, right? And that's the tagline of the brand. And happy to help is something that you kind of posted all over the place. Every communication channel, be it internal, external, is talking about happy to help. Now, when a consumer is consuming this brand and has a problem with this brand, she calls the call center 5 times. All 5 times she doesn't get through. The 6th time she gets through, she gets a recorded message saying, your call is important to us. All our call center service agents are busy. Please hold the line. Please hold the line. Please hold the line. Please hold the line, right? Now, this recorded message keeps coming for 45 seconds. 45 seconds on the clock seems a little time, right? But when you are waiting, is not happy to help. And finally, here's the kicker. You get to the call center agent and the call center agent doesn't even know who you are. This call center agent starts right from the beginning. And mind you, you're a VIP customer. You're a customer who's a customer of this brand for the last 10 years. Now, that kind of loyalty way back then was unheard of. People switch brands today every 2 months, every 2 years, right? 10-year VIP customer and you don't even know who the customer is. You're picking up the call from the customer and asking, who are you? Now, all these touch points, Gayatri, if you look, it's anything but I'm happy to help. The agent is grumpy, she's rude, she doesn't know who you are, she's kept you waiting. It's anything but that. So what happens to the customer is it's a disgruntled customer. And a disgruntled customer will go and tell 24 other people. So the learning, and something that I believe very, very strongly, is if you have a brand and if you have a brand that's talking a promise, every single touch point of yours that is dealing with the consumer, the end consumer, it has to reflect that promise. Otherwise, the experience the consumer takes is a bad one.
Wow, it's a very refreshing point of view to look at it from a customer point of view, to ensure that the touch points are maintained and extremely well articulated in terms of the brand promise, right? I think very interesting. So I'm just curious, what were your recommendation and what did you do about it?
Yeah, good question, right? So we conducted a consulting assignment for these people for around 3 odd months, where a bunch of us would actually sit in the call center at different points in time to get different shifts. So we've actually pulled night shifts as well in the call center just to see what kind of calls are coming and how the call center agents are dealing with them. And at the end of it, during the recommendations, what was told is if your main menu on the interactive voice response system had 10 different options, by the time you start at 1 and come down to 10, you've forgotten what 1 is, right? So a very simple tweak in that is from 9 steps in your IVR, the interactive voice response system, cut it down to 4. So if your main menu has 4, you're okay. Increase the number of lines you have, increase the number of agents you have, so the customer or the end consumer never has to get a busy tone and never has to be on wait for more than 5 seconds, right? And the training that you give to your call center agents, it's a very monotonous job. It's not their fault. It's a monotonous job. So try and rotate them as often as you can so the fatigue factor doesn't set in. And that fatigue factor is then translated back into how you react or how you interact with your consumer. So very, very simple, let me add, seemingly simple tweaks that we made kind of then saw the brand through to a very different level and different point in time. And that's just the beginning. Of course, there was a lot of other stuff we did and we don't need to bore anyone with that. But I'm giving you examples of very simple things that they could do to actually sync up the communication or their touch points with their brand and their brand promise.
Wow, amazing story. Yeah. Having worked in a software solutions company for long, right? What other interactions have you had, if you care to, if you can share in terms of, managing the brand as well as managing the messages also?
Let me give you an instance over here of a company where we were at in a similar situation where we are trying to understand how to craft the entire customer experience of the end consumer. And at times, what happens, Gayatri, is the way the whole value proposition flows is B2B and then B2C. Our first customer is the enterprise, and our consumer is the person who actually consumed their service. So when we talk to customers, what we used to often see is that people who are in charge of marketing, people who are in charge of, let's say, the brand, and people who are in charge of technology, people who are in charge of HR, they are not necessarily synced up, and they are not necessarily all sitting at the decision making table when something as critical as customer experience is being designed. Now, the problem with that is if you don't have all these three factions sitting together, and please add technology, please add finance to this, every single department that touches the end consumer one way or the other, if they are not part of the decision making process when you design customer experience, the whole chain of from when the consumer begins an interaction with you till the time the consumer has finished the interaction, that chain will be broken in multiple places because you're handing the ball. It's like a relay race, right? You're handing the consumer from one department to the other. And if everybody is not synced up, then the end result is felt by the consumer. And that's where the brand promise breaks. That's what we call the moment of truth. The moment of truth will be broken if on the organization side, all departments that are responsible for that moment of truth are not synced up. And many times we found that these critical stakeholders are not at the decision table. And to get to a point where we are able to convince the management that these people are also required when we are designing and talking customer experience was a battle initially. But I think as we progressed and as we kept bringing in more success stories and more case studies and more proof of concept or proof that these things actually work where we designed earlier, I think it became a little easy. That being said, I think this problem still exists, though sporadically, not as bad as it was earlier, that critical stakeholders of customer experience are not at the decision table, and that is a situation that I think we need to change. If customer service, customer experience is something that we are serious about as organizations.
So wanted to understand, I know you've been successful as a marketing professional. What made you switch? You became yeah, you were a co-founder and a chief marketing officer for OpenTap. What made you take the plunge? And the follow-on question is, what did it take to become a part of a CXO club?
So through my last few years in Servion, I was there for 19 years. The number of people you get to interact with and the different kinds of people across different strata that you interact with, you keep filing away these things for later use. It may not be apparent immediately, but you file them away for later use. And somewhere from the time I was a child, the stark imbalance in society vis-a-vis the haves and the have-nots has always been something that bothered me. I could never articulate why it was bothering me. I could never articulate what I would have wanted to do about it. All I knew was this is something that doesn't sit right with me, doesn't feel right to me, and I want to do something to change it. When I resigned from Servion, I resigned and I said, I need to figure out in my head what I want to do next. And the option of doing something on social impact, because this is something that has been, it's been a bugbear with me since I was a child, was coming to the front. I was actually toying with the idea of seeing if I can set up a microfinance institution myself. And when I say microfinance, because it's a direct target to people who don't really have access to money the way people like you and I have access to money. It's an informal sector. It's a financially not included sector. And the point was, how do I bring these people into the formal or organized sector in any small which way I can? While I was playing with the idea, talking to a bunch of people, talking to some of my mentors from Servion as well, it was a chance meeting with one of the founders of OpenTap. We sat down, we had a conversation. I understood what they were doing. I understood the target segment they were going after. They were going after the blue collar segment. It was like an aha moment for me, because that's what I've been trying to do. And to see it being verbalized the way I would have liked to was something that made me think, okay, this is what I want to do. And I took the plunge. For somebody who is not a finance person, for somebody who is not, what do I say? I'm not in love with finance as a subject, right? To move into the fintech industry was a huge transition, and it was a huge learning as well in terms of all the stuff that goes on in financial inclusion and in lending, personal loans and all of that. And it has been an interesting journey, to say the least. So that was the transition, and that's why I transitioned from ITITS into fintech.
Wow. Financial inclusions, particularly in India, right? It's a very personal subject as well to me, Vaishali. Coming from a lower middle class, where some of our my siblings' education, we had given gold or taken a loan and everything, right? If the loan is not available, it is very crippling in terms of going and getting loan in the unorganized market. It's extremely,
Correct.
while it may look very easy from an outside world, right? It says, okay, you just have to give a salary certificate. Where do you go for a salary certificate if you're not in a regular salary earning? It's very, very cool to have taken the plunge. I think hats off to you. Go
I
ahead.
tell you this, Gayatri, I was nervous as hell. I was nervous as hell because it's a huge shift from ITES, and I've done that for 19 years, to put away 19 years and then move into something completely new. And at the stage of my career that I did it in, I was very, very nervous.
I can imagine. And see, sometimes we are also slaves of our comfort, right? Being comfortable, being confident in what we are doing brings a bit of, how do I put it, complacency. I think, how do you ensure that you're not complacent and keep pushing you out of your, the zone where you can really work on your own strengths and everything. I think that may sound very bookish, but I think you're a classic example of having been there, done that. And you mentioned about COVID and what that made happen. So can you share some of the experience of coming out of that? I mean, you're also a decision maker, right? It's not like, somebody else is taking a decision. What kind of a thoughts went through and how did it happen?
Okay. So we were essentially a bootstrapped startup, Gayatri. And whatever monies was there in the system was from friends and family. And we used that to obviously pay the team who was working with us. And when we select a team, we do it very carefully, because for us, when you're talking about financial inclusion and you're talking about, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all, you're talking about blue collared workers who earn less than 25,000 rupees a month. Now, if you have to be dealing and talking with people at that level, if you don't believe that you can do something for them, recruiting those kind of people is absolutely not something we could do. So when we got to a point where we realized that we will have funds up to a point to sustain, we started looking for investments. Without going into too much detail, we did get a few term sheets. The conditions were a little tricky, so we had to politely decline. And saying no when somebody was offering money was a very, very difficult thing to do. But we had to take that call because the terms and conditions were not suitable. And I think we said we will see if we can sustain this for a little longer. And then COVID hit us. And it was a tough call to make, but we knew that if we don't step down, it's going to get worse. So I think the challenge and the trick for everybody, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're a working professional at any level, I think you need to know when to tell yourself to get up or to leave and say, this situation is not going to improve. Yes, I have a lot invested in it from multiple different points of view. It's okay. I have to let it go, because if I don't let it go, it's just going to get worse. You need to know when to say no. You need to know when to stop. And that's a tough call to make. Given the stakes, right? The stakes are so high. You've got a huge team. You have to relocate the team. You have to make sure your team is settled before you close stuff and everything. So it's not easy. It took us almost a year and a half to come through all of that, but was a decision we had to take nevertheless.
I can actually imagine that sort of situation. A very powerful message, Vaishali. I think, and I hope our listeners are taking notes on the entrepreneurship journey, and a very powerful message. So, Vaishali, you and I have been community directors for Chennai for Anita B. How did Anita B association start off, and why such a association? Can you please share?
If you talk to people who are known to me one way or the other, and you ask them to give you a few words of description about who I am, I think most of them will say she's a feminist. It may be partially true, and I'll say partially true only up to a point, because the word feminism today has taken a whole new meaning. And that's a conversation for another day. Let's not get into that. But Gayatri, I come from an extremely conservative community. I belong to a very, very conservative community where day in and day out, we have seen the way boys in our community get treated and girls in our community get treated. And I don't want to depress anybody, but if I don't share an example, they really won't understand what I mean by that, because a lot of people will say, what, really? Even in this day and age? So when we were children, we were in a joint family, and during lunchtime, the kids will all sit together, right? But the boys will get the food first. The boys will get all the bananas that are not too ripe, that don't have all these brown spots and things like that. The chutneys and the sambars, they will all be served to the boys first. Once the boys finish eating, whatever is left, if it's little, it will be watered down. So by the time the girls get to eat, the chutney may not be chutney, but just be chutney water, right? At this point in time, it sounds funny, but when you're a child and you see that kind of distinction even in something as basic as food, you may not really understand at that time why it's happening, but it kind of goes and lodges in your head, right? And then it keeps festering. So some of my earliest thoughts of this huge discrimination stuff, it happened then. I want to share something very profound, very interesting that happened in my life that kind of made me get up and say, okay, this is not something that's going to ever be okay with me. When I was in my 10th, I wanted to become a lawyer. And I used to go with my father whenever he went to meet our family lawyer for a bunch of stuff. And I used to be fascinated with that man. And it kind of started festering in my head that I want to become a lawyer. And one fine day, I just, kind of broke the news to my dad saying, I want to become a lawyer. And Appa at that point, for whatever reason, he very sweetly said, yeah, the ambition is women lawyers will struggle to get married. So I don't want you to become a lawyer, because you'll get married and then all you will do at home is argue, right? So I thought it was no, actually, I'm telling you, it happened.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, it happened. And I was telling my father, listen, which world are you in? This is just, at least let me give it a shot. And the argument went on back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then finally he said, okay, let's do this. We go to the head of the family. And by the way, those concepts still exist in our community. So first thing in my mind is, I'm going to go and ask somebody who's not my dad, but my dad's older brother, right, to take a decision on my life and on my career going forward. Anyway, at that point, we really couldn't talk back. So we had to confirm. And he listens and very compassionately says, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Why don't we do this? So here I am, I'm thinking, okay, he's going to say yes, and I'm all thrilled and everything. And he very, very calmly, sweetly tells me, let's get you married. You go and ask your husband. If your husband allows you to become a lawyer, You can go ahead and study law. If your husband says no, no it is.
Wow, seriously.
And I have just finished my 10th standard and I get told, you get married. If your husband allows, you can do this. If your husband doesn't. And at that time, Gayatri, that conversation is so fresh in my mind. I can still feel the anger. I can still feel the resentment that somebody else is going to control my destiny and what I will do with my life, right? And that kind of is lodged in the head so strongly that at that point in time, had I had a mentor, had I had somebody who would understand what I'm saying, and not just then, even throughout my work life, there have been points when I wish there was a lady I could have gone and talked to in terms of understanding different, and I'm not saying softer, I'm saying different aspects of work life that I may not have been comfortable at that point. And we are talking about 96, comfortable talking to a man, right? That is what has brought me to what I do for Anita Borg, because what I didn't have way back then, I want to see if I'm able to, in some way or the other, give to women today. Because people like you and me, we've all had our experiences, and experiences shape up who we are and what we do. If we are able to impact even one woman's life positively, able to help one woman do what she wants to do with her life, I think we are done.
Wow, that's a very, very powerful story, Vaishali. So, what do you do in Anita B? And I know you are holding several positions, not just in Anita B. So, can you please share those aspects of it?
So with Anita Borg, we run a community for Chennai where basically we are bringing women in Chennai together from ITES. And we run a series of different programs and interventions to either provide a skill perspective, and the skill perspective could be technology, it could be non-technology, it could be for middle managers, it could be for senior women, or it could be for people transitioning from one to the other. And also being available, creating a space where women today can feel safe in talking about their issues and problems and finding solutions within the community itself. Now, this is something, Gayatri, somebody like you and me would never have had when we were growing up. So from that point of view, to even have a network and create a safe space for women to talk was critical, and that's what Anita Borg does. Specifically in Chennai, what we thought we should do, Gayatri, is you and me, we saw how a journey of a woman progresses. And we see that at various stages, women drop off the workforce. Um, like happened with me, right? You get married after you finished your 10th. If your husband says, okay, you can do law. If he says no, you just sit at home, right? So you dropped out right in school. If that had happened to me, I would have dropped out in school, and you and I would not be having this conversation today. So at different points in the graph of a woman, she's dropping off this educational and professional radar for a variety of reasons. So we strategically took that journey, we broke it down into logical phases and said if they are dropping off at these points in time, how do we as a community work at these points where they drop off and see what kind of help can we provide them so they don't necessarily have to drop off and they continue their journey in workforce for as long as they choose to. Should they choose they don't want to continue, that's a different matter altogether. But we don't want anyone to feel compelled to leave because they don't have the support they need, or they don't have people to motivate them, or to, in the sense of, I have your back. They don't have people to tell them that I have your back and, go do this. So that is one part of what we do in the Chennai community at Anita Borg. The other part is, how do we get students to transition into the workspace seamlessly so they don't drop off from there? Because the transition from college into the work life also is a very, very big change. And if you don't have the right support during that change in terms of preparation, how do you prepare yourself for the corporate world? How do you prepare yourself for interviews? How do you skill yourself, right? And when you are in those situations, if you need someone to talk to, you need somebody like a sounding board, like you and I have in each other. If you don't have those support systems at the college to workspace transition itself, we will lose more. We will lose a lot of women. So what we are also doing as a second strategic program at Anita Borg is to see how we can help these women transition smoothly from college into an educational institution. So basically transitioning from the classroom into the boardroom. How do they make that transition, and how do we as a network help them through that transition? So that is one part of what we do at Anita Borg. I also work with another NGO called HopeWorks Foundation, which deals with women from the lowest economic strata. And even when I say lowest economic strata, I'm cringing to use words like that. But these are children, women, children of auto riders, of bus riders, of people who sweep streets and things like that, where they don't have access to funds, they don't have access to quality education. And outside of education, they don't really have a mentoring system. They don't really have someone they can go and talk to on a regular basis to even tell them that, hey, these are some problems I'm going through at work. And they don't necessarily need solutions. Sometimes all is just somebody to listen to what they have to say. So HopeWorks, God bless the work they do, maps out these women and they give one child per mentor. So they're trying to get to a ratio of 1:1, where you have one mentor for every child that they are enrolling in their program. And that is a year-long commitment that the mentor makes to the mentee and is available to them at any point in time for any kind of requirement outside of the financial one, because HopeWorks takes care of that. But anything else in terms of, hey, I want to do CA. How do I go about it? I want to learn Korean pop. How do I go about it? Right? I want to become an actor. Can you put me on to somebody? I had a bad day today. I just need somebody to talk to. Can you listen to me for 10 minutes? So these are the kind of requirements that come up with a one-on-one mentorship. And through some of these conversations, Gayatri, while you do the conversation, it's very heavy on the heart. But at night when you sleep peacefully in the knowledge that you have been there for somebody in the nicest way possible, that kind of help they may not have otherwise had. So that's the work that I'm currently in my small little way trying to contribute through to NGOs that I work with, Anita Borg and HopeWorks Foundation.
Wow, hearing your background, right, in terms of your traditional and conservative way of upbringing, and to scaling the heights of corporate world as well as being in the startup world. And I also feel that, giving back in a very productive manner and a most effective manner that we can is extremely fulfilling in terms of they can see that somebody has done it and they can also do it. And B is sometimes it's all it needs in a dark point is just a hope of light. A sliver of light is all is needed to pump you up, to say, hey, guess what? That is something that I am deeply interested in, and to keep the message. In the end of the day, while Instagrams and Twitters of the world could show the message, the one-on-one interaction where you come in person, come live and say, hey, you know what, while it may look like, we have all this superhero gadgets, it's not the same. We also have had those issues, and here is how we solve for it, right?
Exactly.
While I was listening to your stories of transformation, one of the questions that is coming in my mind, Vaishali, if you don't mind answering, is that how did you upskill yourself through the journey? Did it take a lot of continuous learning to this point where you are standing today?
Yeah, yet another interesting question, and I'm not surprised because you do this. You do this so often and you do this so well. Two things, Gayatri, when it comes to a transition, whether it's a transition from one industry to the other or whether it's a transition from one position to the other, the first thing we have to do is unlearn. And boy, did I have to unlearn. The amount of unlearning I have done when I transitioned from ITES into fintech and straight to the bottom of the pyramid, so to speak. Every meeting that we've had in Servion has been in these large corporate offices, AC rooms, tea, coffee being served, and what have you. And we are discussing things of huge commercial impact. and cut to the fintech world, where sometimes we've actually had meetings in people's homes, which is not even a single room. It's half a room. 4 people live in that room. You have to be able to sit on the floor with them, drink a cup of tea with them in their, in their humble home, enjoy that tea and actually enjoy it, not pretend to enjoy it, have a conversation with them, and get to a point where they believe you're genuine. So when you've been dealing with the vice presidents and the GMs of all these large private sector organizations and blue chip companies, your personality comes through differently. And when you go and sit at somebody's home on the floor, the personality that you have to project is extremely different. It's like chalk and cheese. And if you're not comfortable doing that, it'll come up as fake. So to even unlearn how to project yourself was a big change for me. So unlearning a lot of that, unlearning how marketing actually worked for an ITS company, while the basic tenets and principles of marketing would remain the same for every industry, the way you would go about it would be extremely different. So in ITS, if it had to be B2B to C, in fintech, it's probably a lot of B2C because you're going directly to the consumer. So all of that changes. So a huge lot of unlearning needs to happen. And in terms of learning itself from the industry, I used to read a lot when I joined OpenTap, and during my initial days, I used to do a lot of reading, and I used to write down words and phrases that I wouldn't understand, because I'm coming from a non-fintech background. So I would used to write down all these new terminologies that kept coming up, and I would go and bug my business partner. I'd go sit down in his room and say, okay, here are a set of new words that I have kind of picked up today. Help me understand this, right? I used to read articles. I used to go and talk to people. I've actually talked to a lot of people before I took the plunge to even understand if I'm able to wrap my mind around fintech as a concept. So unlearning is the first thing. You have to actually remove everything in your pot before you add new things to your pot. So you remove all the old stuff and then start adding new stuff little by little by little. And while you do all of this informally, I also did some online courses. Challenges in Global Poverty is one of them. You do online courses that are relevant to the subject that you are dealing with on a daily basis. And you should be comfortable with the language and with what is required in terms of how the industry works. So unlearning and then learning, and that's the process that I went through.
And these widgets of wisdom, right, sounds very simple on the book, but it takes a while to practice and be in the moment and stay there, right? I think wonderful, Vaishali. I know we have been having such interesting conversation through talking about your career, touching various facets. Is there any message that you would like to share with our listeners?
Gayatri, on the previous conversation on learning, I just wanted to add one thing. I strongly believe, Gayatri, regardless of the position you hold, if you don't know something, I think it's important to say, I don't know. And the minute you say, I don't know, whether you say it to yourself or you tell it to somebody else, the minute you say, I don't know, that is the first step of learning something new. You've got to be humble enough. You've got to carry the humility to say, hey, this is something I don't know or I don't understand, and walk up to somebody who knows this either better or who has done this for a living and learn from them. If you keep an open mind when you move into a new situation or a new position and are humble enough to say, hey, I don't know and I want to learn, the whole transition process is extremely easy. The process is easy in terms of, okay, now we know what to do. But learning is difficult, like you said. It sounds simple, but you have to give it your all. Starting point, however, I'm going to repeat, is you have to be humble enough to say, I don't know. Otherwise, it's a lost cause.
Very well put, Vaishali. One of the conversations you and I had were like, if a woman specifically, if there is a 10 skills that we talk about, always we think that if all 10 are there, then only you have to apply for it. I think that also
Correct.
reflects what you're saying, right? Has that been your experience
Correct.
as well?
To a large extent, yes. Because when you look at, and let's not even take a job interview specifically, right? And this is rampant in a job interview situation where you see the JD and they've asked for 10 different things, and the more senior you get, the more trickier the requirements are. They'll ask for 10 different things. You will check 8 of them, but in 2 of them, you may have had maybe 50% learning or 50% experience, and in one of them, you may not have had anything at all. And because it's an 8.5 on 10 on the checklist requirement, you will actually feel bad applying for it, saying, no, I don't qualify. And I think that is conditioning. We've been brought up like that, unconsciously perhaps, not consciously, but unconsciously brought up like that, where unless it's a full 10 on 10, there are 10 requirements, I match all these 10 requirements, okay, now I'm going to go and apply. So that is also a learning we need to have. In a leadership position, you don't need to know everything. If you know 4 things well, and there are 2 things that you don't know well, go and hire somebody who's damn good at those 2 things that you don't know. Humility again comes here, right? It's okay if you don't know. You don't have to know everything. Leaders are not perfect. Leaders don't have to know everything. If there is something you don't know well enough, go and hire someone. Have enough working knowledge to know that they're not bullshitting you, right? And that's all you need. Surround yourself with people who complement your skill set. And that's critical.
Very well put, Vaishali. If there are any, takeaways that you want to share with our listeners.
There is only one thing I want to add to all of the stuff I've been saying, Gayatri, is, and it's a quotation. I'm not sure the person who's written the quotation is known, but it's a quotation that resonates extremely well with me, and something that I have used at various points of my life is that if you follow in other people's footsteps, you will never make your own. And the point is, if you're trying to follow somebody's footsteps, you need to be exactly like that person, and no 2 people are the same. You need to go out there and create your own unique identity. If you don't, you're just becoming yet another somebody else. And that is not something that I think women in general and women leaders should do. Go out there and create your own identity, make your own footsteps. Do not step on somebody else's footsteps.
Very well put. I think each of us are unique in our own sense, right? And Vaishali, I love the conversation. Extremely powerful. And I'm wishing all the listeners a very, very happy Women's Month celebration. And may the power be with you.
Gayatri, when I am talking about what has happened through my professional life, it's like a walk down memory lane. I am right now feeling a huge set of mixed emotions. There is joy, there is happiness, there is a little bit of sadness that these are, things of the past. But then when I look back as to where I was when I started and where I am today in my professional journey, I'm extremely grateful for the opportunities I've had. And if I had the opportunity to do it all over again the same way, I most probably would.
Very, very well put. Extremely strong message there, Vaishali. Thank you so very much.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.